Last fall, I tested a 480 grain arrow in a single bevel broadhead on 5 different animals. I wanted to answer the question, do you need to shoot a heavy arrow to get great penetration, or is it the broadhead that does the majority of the work? In this video, we're gonna be looking at each individual kill shot and examining the shot distance, the shot placement, the penetration, and the overall performance of this setup. I really wanted to find out if a lightweight arrow with a single bevel broadhead can give you the best of both worlds with arrow flight, pin gaps, and penetration. Let's dig into it. I'm Christian Babcock of The Hunter's Advantage, and I wanted to start out in this video giving you a little context on my general philosophy on bows, arrows, and broadheads. For a decade, I almost exclusively shot expandable broadheads with kind of a mixed bag of results. Sometimes I'd shoot a deer and blood would be pumping out of them like a water hose and they run 10 yards and fall over. And other times I'd see my arrow get 5 inches of penetration and watch a nice buck run out of my life with an arrow sticking out of him that I was never gonna see again. And I'm not completely blaming broadheads and arrow setups on my failure. I was really young into bow hunting and really young in general when I started. So a lot of this was probably user error. So fast forward to 2023, I switched to a VPA single bevel broadhead, which was 150 grains up front, and for an overall total arrow weight of 580 grains, which is a lot heavier than my setup. As you can see, I was trending towards the upward. I started at like 450, went to 525, and then eventually landed at 580, which is typical of more of kind of a ranch fairy type setup. Out of the 6 deer that I shot, 4 of them were mature bucks, 3 of them being 5-year-olds, and 1 of them being a 4.5-year-old. And then I shot 2 does pretty close range as well. And I was having really good results. Each animal that I was shooting at was blowing through them. I remember the first deer that I shot with that more of a ranch fairy setup, I couldn't find my arrow, and my buddy Drew on my lease ended up finding it like 2.5, 3 weeks later because it had blew through the animal and was sitting at the bottom of a cedar tree 50 yards away. The blood trails on those single bevels were somewhat of a mixed bag as well. Some of them were exceptional, like bleeding out of a water hose, and others were just okay. I'm naturally a kind of a tinkering guy, and the thing that made me really reconsider some of my setup at that point in time was I shot at a doe in the last week of the season. I ranged her for 20 yards. She took a few more steps, and I guess as I was adjusting my sight, I just didn't really pay attention or notice. And she ended up being at 26 yards. I shot at her, I held a little low on her, and I shot 3 inches under her. The difference between 20 and 26 yards was the difference between me fully hitting the deer and missing them completely. I left that season with an increased amount of confidence, but I also left with just more questions of what I wanted to do going forward. If I was never shooting over 25 yards, I would probably shoot an exclusively just super heavy 580 plus grain arrow setup for whitetails. But we hunt out west, we hunt antelope, we hunt elk. We're going sick of blacktail hunting this year, so longer shots are somewhat of a norm hunting out west, and this setup just wasn't gonna work for me in the long term in those scenarios. Especially hunting public land whitetails, you never know if a deer is gonna be at 25 yards or 37 yards or 52 yards, and there's a lot of movement when you're not baiting. Those deer are constantly shifting around in grasses and cuts, and you just need a little more forgiveness in your setup in those unpredictable scenarios, especially on public land. We finally get to this year. I knew I wanted to shoot a single bevel broadhead. In my opinion, there's not a whole lot of reason to shoot something that has points of failure like a mechanical. I don't hate people that do, I don't care. I've done it for a long time myself, but I had great results with a single bevel, so I wanted to stick to that. But I had kind of a general hypothesis or something that I wanted to figure out for myself, which was, could I shrink the weight of the arrow, going from 580 to 480, get closer pins, so less pin gaps, get extended range out of my sight, get a flatter shooting trajectory, which gives you more forgiveness downrange, and then also gets the penetration of a single bevel broadhead that's milled out of a single piece of steel. I wanted to know, can I get the best of both worlds? Can I use the best parts of a single bevel and use the best, get all the benefits of a lightweight arrow, merge those together, and then take them into a hunting scenario and get really good results? I used a Victory VAP TKO this last year with a 3 fletch configuration, a 50 grain collar, up front and 125 grain broadhead. So I had 175 grains up front with about 15% FOC. By the way, I did want to mention too, I'm shooting a PSE Evo NTN at 74 pounds and 31.5-inch draw length. So my shots kind of got some get behind it. So let's dig into the results of each one of my 2024 kills and talk about the shot distance, the shot angle, the penetration, and just the overall performance of the setup. So we headed out to New Mexico in September and hunted elk. So on the 5th day of the hunt, we called in a bull, and caller kind of sit back behind us. I shifted around to the right side of where the bull was bugling, and he came up through the brush. I drew back. So bull comes up 25 yards, I draw back broadside, I put it right on the point, vital V of the shoulder, I shoot, complete pass through at 480 grains, and basically the only thing that's sticking out on the other end is the fletchings, right? So arrow breaks right at the fletchings stay in the animal. My shot was completely broadside. He runs out to about 60 yards, and he sits out there. Well, you can tell when he stops at 60, there's just blood pouring out of the shoulder. I mean, the shot is perfect, he's a dead bull running. But if I ever get an opportunity to put another arrow in an animal, I do. So I drew back again. I used my 40-yard pin, shot him for about 60, just held it right over his back, shot right in the front of the shoulder, penetration right through the neck. I think I hit the jugular, and he runs another 20 yards and falls over. So the shot distances were 25 yards and 60 yards. Pass-throughs on both. The 60-yard one is hard to draw a lot of results from because you're hitting in the kind of the narrowest part of the animal in the neck, right? There's not a whole lot of bones except you hit that straight neck bone that runs down. So I basically just pass through meat and, blood vessels and veins, arteries. So that one kind of made sense to me why it was really easy to pass through at 60 yards. The one that impressed me more was the 25-yard broadside shot where I shot right into the vital V, through the shoulder, through soft tissue, through bone, through organs, and just passed through flawlessly with a pretty lightweight setup for a guy like me shooting 74 pounds and 31.5-inch draw. So that scenario with the blood trails was really impressive. That scenario with the overall performance of the penetration was great, especially on an animal. I had that bull aged, and he was a 3.5-year-old bull, and probably weighed somewhere around 400 pounds. So that impressed me, and I was really happy with my setup out of the gate. And to be honest, I was thinking, wow, if it performs this way on an elk, I'm gonna have some really good performance on whitetail, which is exactly what I went to testing after that. So for the second animal that I shot with this 480 grain setup was a buck, the biggest buck of my life that I shot in western Oklahoma. 162-inch 11 point, which I was super proud of. So this deer kind of gives me the slip. He runs around the right side of these trees, works into this bait pile, and he's sitting there at 23 yards, quartering 2. So he was quartering hard to me for a little while, and I drew back and kind of waited to take the shot. Eventually he gets to, I would call a slight quartering 2, but still where the front crest of that shoulder is sitting, definitely where I want to be shooting. But I have so much confidence in my setup at this point that I'm not to the point where I'm going to intentionally aim at a shoulder, but if it's in the way, it's not something that I'm going to steer away from with a really good, single bevel broadhead from BPA. I shoot this deer, goes right through the shoulder, basically front part of the shoulder, and then exits right behind the other shoulder on a maybe about a 15-degree quartering 2 angle, and I knew this deer was dead as soon as I shot. I shot at him, stuck right through the shoulder, and the arrow was sticking in the dirt, kind of canted up like this, and I pulled out my binos as he ran off, and I saw the arrow just sticking up like that, and I knew he was dead. But the deer runs about 35 yards, stops, kind of looks around, which kind of gave me mixed signals on if he was completely dead or not, which was kind of weird to me. But then he kind of jolted off and strutted, and he ended up running probably another 70 yards, and he fell because he couldn't get over the fence. I'm pretty sure I ended up hitting him probably top of the heart. It was a third of the way up, and put him down really quick. So at this point in the season, I'm only a month and a half into the season, or only 2 weeks into October, and I shot a bull elk, and I shot the biggest buck of my life, and have had pass-throughs on both pretty big animals. I'd say that buck that I shot was probably in 180 pounds live weight. It wasn't a super big deer, and I had him officially aged by deerage.com as well, and he was a 5.5-year-old buck. So shot a decent elk and then a mature buck, and got really good results on both of those. So fast forward to November, I was hunting a piece of public land here that I dropped for in Central Texas. And on this particular hunt, you had to shoot 2 does before you could shoot a buck. So that was my mission. So I went out, was hunting from the ground in my ghillie suit, which is hilarious. And tucked back in those cedar trees, it actually works pretty good. So maybe that's something that someone can do in the future. I'm definitely gonna keep hunting out of the ghillie suit. It was fun. So I had a doe come in at 25 yards, pretty much completely broadside. She walks in this little ditch. I draw back on her and I shoot her at 25 yards and didn't have a complete pass through, which was a little weird to me. It was hanging out by the fletchings. And here in Central Texas, like a mature doe might be 70 pounds. And so it was kind of confusing, the smallest deer that I'd shot all year and probably the worst performance that I had. And so the deer, 25 yards, she pretty much dropped, had a lot of kinetic energy, pretty much a perfect shot, which confused me on why she dropped. I didn't spine her or anything like that. But I mean, I still got pretty much a pass through on her, but it didn't impress me in any sense of the word. But 12 ringed her in the late part of November. I ended up shooting a second doe on this place. And it was weird because I had so many different bucks coming in to this set, but it was like I struggled more to find does than I did a buck. I had to pass 3 mature Central Texas bucks because I hadn't shot my second doe yet, which was just painful watching those walk by and knowing, okay, I got to kill another doe. But I eventually had another doe come in she was 35 yards, hard quartering 2. Like I said, these Central Texas does are not very big. So I drew back on her and shot basically in front of the shoulder and exited about mid-body. And so you can see she wasn't frontal, but she was probably at a pretty strict 45. So I put it in front of the shoulder. Full pass through, zipped through her, great blood. Blood trailed probably 125 yards and found her laying underneath a cedar tree. So it's hard to derive a lot from shooting a Central Texas deer on penetration. The 5th and final animal that I will talk about is a buck that I shot in late December in Oklahoma. So this is the same spot that I shot the 162-inch deer earlier in the year. Me and my buddy Drew ended up losing this lease, so I wanted to go shoot another mature buck out of there before it was gone. And I had a really nice, probably 4.5-year-old 8-point come in. He worked right by me to the left in the morning, and I actually spooked him trying to draw my bow back once, but he comes back in and he's pretty much, I would say, so far I've shot 2 quartering 2 and in this test 2 pretty much completely broadside. He kind of rounded up the experience with a slight quartering away. I would probably say 10 degrees. And so 25-yard shot, I put it right behind the shoulder, maybe 3 inches behind the shoulder, and just blew right through him. I mean, stuck into the dirt behind him. I shoot him, blows right through him. He runs 25 yards and just falls over. That was one of those situations where you shoot a deer and you just like start packing up your stuff because you're like, yeah, that one's done. I didn't have blood for probably 10 yards, but I also didn't spend a lot of time looking because I knew he was probably going to be right on the other side of the cedar tree. So this is a good size buck too. He was, like I said, probably a 4.5-year-old buck. So I want to continue to test this setup on antelope long range, on whitetails in the mid to longer ranges. I'm not going to go out and shoot deer just for the sake of testing, but I hope through years and years of trying just different setups, I can get some results and see what the penetration would be on a big whitetail at 40 yards or 50 yards. So just kind of give you some summary and thoughts about my experience. You can probably tell that I was pretty pleased with the results out of my setup, and I was pretty pleased the last year as well when I shot that 580 grain arrow. I had great results until I shot right underneath that doe in the late season the year before, which kind of opened up a whole nother thing of questions. I was pleased with both results, but I'll tell you one thing I enjoyed out of the 480 grain arrow plus the single bevel is great penetration because of a single bevel and good FOC, but also, like I said, less pin gap, flatter trajectory, more forgiveness. Those were some benefits as well. If you're familiar with Dr. Ed Ashby's work and the 12 factors of penetration, arrow mass doesn't even come up till the 6th factor. And I made sure during that test I was shooting high quality arrows, a paper tune bow and a Noctune bow, and made sure I got great arrow flight. Choosing a broadhead that you can hand sharpen yourself and it's made out of a single piece of steel construction, it gives me a ton of confidence that that thing that's actually driving through and cutting organs is gonna do its job and it's not gonna fail. At the end of the day, what I'll probably end up doing is scaling my arrow weight up and down, depending on the different game or shot distances that I plan on taking throughout the fall. I don't wanna be one of those people that's forced to sit in a camp. I wanna be flexible and change my mind based on different results that I see in the field. The only thing that I'm kind of stubborn on is the likelihood of me going back to an expandable broadhead is pretty low after having really good results with fixed blades and single bevels for 4 or 5 years now. That being said, thank you guys for checking out the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, because we have lots more content coming out like this. We post podcasts every single week. We post review videos, we post hunts, kill shot videos. We've got a little bit of everything on the channel, and we think you guys will enjoy some of the stuff we got coming up next. If you guys are interested in picking up some fixed blade or single bevel broadheads that are 100% made in America, go check out our friends Vantage Point Archery at vparchery.com and use code HA10 for 10% off anything on their website. At this point, I've shot dozens of animals with VPA stuff, and I trust them in any scenario to get the job done. Thank you guys for watching the video. Always remember, Jesus loves you, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.